All right, let's be honest. Have you ever inherited a data pipeline and just felt completely lost? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's that daily grind of just putting out fires, wrestling with this messy, tangled code, and trying to build something reliable on a foundation that feels like sand. Well, in this explainer, we're going to change all that. We are going to transform that chaos into crystal clarity and turn those messy pipelines into assets you can actually count on.
This quote, wow, it's probably painfully familiar if you've ever worked in data. It's that sinking feeling you get staring at a 1,000-line script, knowing there's critical business logic buried in there somewhere, but no one, and I mean no one, dares to touch it. Why? Because you're afraid of breaking everything. It's a really tough spot to be in. But the good news is there is a much, much better way.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dive right into the problem, what I'm calling the data pipeline grind. Then we'll talk about a modular revolution, a whole new way to think about our code. From there, we'll actually build a data assembly line step by step. We'll cover how to build business-ready data, how to automate trust with tests, and finally, we'll zoom out and see how this all creates a totally new and better workflow for the whole team. Okay, so before we can really appreciate the solution, we've got to get on the same page about the problem. Let's take a quick trip back to the before times of data modeling. This was an era where these huge, sprawling SQL scripts were king. And the result? Well, let's just say data pipelines were often untrustworthy and pretty much impossible to maintain. The old way was, well, it was a monolithic nightmare. Just picture this. 5 different people on your team all need to analyze monthly sales. In that old world, every single one of them starts from scratch, from the raw, messy source tables. And what do you get? You get 5 slightly different definitions of monthly sales, a ton of duplicated work, and absolutely zero trust in the final numbers. It's pure chaos. So how do we break free from this mess? Well, it's not just a new tool or technique. It actually requires a revolution in how we think. We have to stop seeing our data transformations as one giant, fragile script. Instead, we need to start treating them as a collection of small, independent, and reusable building blocks that all fit together. Okay, just look at the difference here. It's night and day. On the left, you've got the monolithic mess. It's a total free-for-all, right? You end up with these tangled dependencies that are impossible to follow, and nobody trusts the data. But on the right, that's the modular approach. Here, you're actually building on top of the great foundational work your teammates have already done. Every single transformation is broken down into these clean, distinct steps. The data lineage, it's crystal clear. And what do you get out of that? High trust and real collaboration. It's a total game changer. As you start to work this way, in this new modular fashion, just keep these 3 questions in your back pocket. They're like your North Star for building a healthy data project. First, can a new person join the team and actually understand what's going on? Second, is the code clean? And are you avoiding repetition? Is it dry? And finally, maybe most importantly, when something breaks, can anyone on the team easily find and fix the problem? All right, so let's get practical. How does this modular philosophy actually work? Well, we're going to build our data pipeline like a well-oiled assembly line. And any good assembly line always starts with prepping the raw materials. In our world, this first absolutely foundational step is called the staging layer. Now, the key to the staging layer is its simplicity. Seriously, these models have one job and one job only, to be a clean, one-to-one reflection of your source tables. All you're doing here is the most basic cleanup, renaming columns that have weird names, casting data into the right types, maybe a little filtering. That is it. And hey, notice that STG_ prefix? Consistent naming is always the first step toward clarity. To really make this stick, let's use an analogy we're going to come back to, a salad bar. Think of your staging models as the prep station in the back. You're not mixing the salad yet. You were just washing the lettuce, chopping the tomatoes, and slicing the cucumbers. Each ingredient is prepped perfectly, consistently, so it's clean, reliable, and ready for anyone to use later on. Okay, we've prepped our raw ingredients in the staging layer. Now it's time to move down the assembly line. This is where we start combining those ingredients, applying our specific business logic, and creating the final products that our stakeholders actually need. This all happens in the intermediate and marts layers. This table really breaks it down nicely. We've already covered the STG layer. Next up is the int layer, or intermediate layer. This is where you do the more complex work, like joining several of those staging models together. And then finally, you have the marts layer. This is where we create those polished, business-ready datasets for our end users, often organized into fact tables, which hold events and metrics, and dimension tables, which describe the who, what, and where of our data. Let's go back to our salad bar. If staging was just prepping the raw ingredients, then intermediate models are like creating those reusable components. So think about mixing oil and vinegar to create a vinaigrette. You're combining ingredients into something useful, but it's not the final meal. And the marts? Well, those are the finished salads right there on display, the chicken Caesar, the Greek salad, all assembled and ready for your hungry end users to just grab and go.
And don't get me wrong, this is where the real magic happens. This is where we embed our crucial business logic. We're joining clean components, applying conditional logic with case-when statements, running complex calculations with window functions, and aggregating data to answer really important questions like, what is our monthly recurring revenue? This is where raw data actually becomes business insight.
So, we've built this beautiful modular pipeline. It looks great, but here's the million-dollar question. How do we know it's actually correct? How do we build and, more importantly, maintain trust in our data day in and day out? The answer is simple, but it is totally transformative. We automate testing at every single step. And look, this isn't just some niche trend for a few tech startups in Silicon Valley. We're talking about over 25,000 companies using tools like dbt to embed testing right into their workflow. So why are they all doing this? It's simple, really. They've done the math. They've realized that the millions, literally millions of dollars lost to bad business decisions, well, that loss is way bigger than the cost of building a data foundation you can actually trust. Stopping bad data before it gets to decision makers, that is probably the single most important thing a data team can do.
The absolute easiest place to start is with what are called generic tests. Just think about it. Every single order in your system must have a unique ID. If it doesn't, your revenue numbers are just plain wrong. Every customer must have a sign-up date. If they don't, you can't calculate churn. These simple, out-of-the-box tests are your first line of defense against these kinds of critical, business-breaking errors.
And here's the really beautiful part. Putting these tests in place is incredibly simple. In a configuration file that lives right there with your code, you just declare your expectations. Right here, we're stating a very simple, non-negotiable rule. The order date column cannot be null. Ever. If a row with a null date ever shows up, the test will fail, the build will stop, and your team gets an alert before anyone downstream even lays eyes on that bad data. Generic tests are a fantastic starting point, but they really are just the beginning of the journey. As your team gets more mature, you can write singular tests, which are custom SQL queries to check for specific business rules. And for your most complex logic, you can even write unit tests that check your code against some sample data. Put them all together, and you've got a comprehensive safety net for your data. So for our final section, let's just zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because adopting this modular test-driven approach, it's not just a technical upgrade. It fundamentally changes how your team works together. It elevates analytics from this chaotic, siloed craft into a mature, collaborative engineering discipline. This whole transformation is captured in a framework called the Analytics Development Lifecycle, or ADLC. And this is a real game changer. It takes these battle-tested principles from software engineering, things like planning, rigorous testing, and continuous observation, and it applies them directly to the world of analytics. It gives your team a shared language and a shared process for building reliable data products. And this is where our automated tests become a superpower. You see, traditionally, developers would work in these isolated branches for weeks, which would lead to these painful merge conflicts when they finally tried to combine their work. But with a strong safety net of tests, teams can confidently move to a much more dynamic workflow, like trunk-based development, where everyone integrates small changes frequently. This is only possible when you trust your automated tests to catch any issues right away. And that brings us to a final thought to leave you with. As the world of data analytics stands on the shoulders of giants in software engineering, we gain this incredible reliability and power. But we also have to ask ourselves, should we just follow in their footsteps? Or is it time to start forging our own path, building a future for data that's even better than the one we inherited? Thanks so much for joining me.